Welcome back to another episode of Streetwise English. Today we have an interview with a returning guest, Matt Gibson, aka the Voice of God.
I'd just like to share one of the greatest, most bestest things that ever happened to me in my whole life. And I hope it sounds as wonderful as it really was. I was driving across country, about to join my brother in San Francisco. I had left Cincinnati, and I kind of took a more southern route and came through New Mexico. And I think I was in New Mexico or Arizona. I was kind of just taking my time, taking photographs as I went across country. Well, I was exhausted, and I pull into this town, and I'm not even sure the name of this town, but I probably could find it out because it has a distinctive aquatic center in that town, a beautiful brand new aquatic center with a giant swimming pool in this town in the middle of the desert somewhere. And it was probably in Arizona or New Mexico, but I'm going to research and figure out where it was. It shouldn't be too hard because the aquatic center was brand new at the time and magnificent, a gigantic, in a hot little small town. I checked into a motel. It was hot. I'd been driving all day, and I asked the motel owner, is there any swimming pool around here? There was none at the motel. Just a little dinky motel. And he said, we have the aquatic center up at the top of the hill. Go up there and swim. So I was so happy. It was 100 degrees. I'm sweating. We've been in a non-air conditioned car driving across country. I go up to the aquatic center. I go in. It is beautiful, a brand new, like a building with an indoor gigantic pool. It was lovely. It looked like just a gem of an aquatic center. And so I go in. The pool is full of children. I mean, full of children, one end to the other. It must have been hundreds of them in there because the pool was gigantic. And 99% of them were American Indian children. And so I go over to the lifeguard, and he was telling, well, you can't swim today because, not now. He said, because, this is the children's swim, and the adults swim at another time. And I was so hot. I'd been on the road. I was just wanting to get in that water, and the kids were just giggling, having a wonderful time. All these little Native American children playing around in the pool. So I sat on the edge of the pool with the lifeguard and chatted with him. He could see I was so frustrated. He said, go on and get in there. Get in right here in that corner of the pool, right here in front of the lifeguard station. So I said, oh, thank you. And I jumped in the pool. It was so wonderful to walk. You can imagine, it was 100 degrees outside. It's an air-conditioned indoor beautiful pool, and I'm talking about if there was one child in that pool, it was 500. It was a gigantic pool. It was packed end to end. Soon as I get in the pool, and some kids came over and were talking to me and saying things to me, and so I was just kind of laying there in the water and just enjoying the cool pool, and the kids started pulling me by one hand. Well, they start pulling me by my hair and pulling me by my hand and arm, and were pulling me and pushing me over to some other kids. And some other kids would grab me, and they were pulling me down toward away. And I couldn't believe it. And one of them, they would have me, one would be pulling my foot, and the other would be pulling my hair, and my other would have my hand, and they were pulling, they were passing me and laughing, and they were pushing me. They pushed me from one end of that pool to the other as though it was some kind of game or something. I bet you more than half of them children touched me at some point or another and I was just floating on my back. They're pulling me around. When I got back to the front, they brought me all the way back to where the lifeguard was. This maybe have taken 10 or 15 minutes to do. When I got there, I crawled up out of the pool. I was so exhausted and so laughing, and it was so funny. I was so giddy with happiness. I've never experienced anything like it in my whole life. It was one of the happiest moments of my entire life was there in that pool.
So that was like the original crowd surfing, right? Or,
it was. I'm telling you.
Like at the concerts when they put you up on their hands, they push you around.
It surely was. It was wonderful. And I think about it, and it's on my list of the greatest things that ever happened to me in my whole life. That day in that pool with those Indian children.
So let's talk about swimming. So you've always liked the water.
Oh yeah.
You've been comfortable in the water. You've done your meditations.
Yes.
You've even done some rescues, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. I worked in pools and worked. I've gone and gotten a number of people. Not to mention the thing in Saudi Arabia where I jumped off the ship to get Stewart was his name. And wherever you are, Stewart, if you hear this, you have me to thank, because when you hit that float in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and flopped in the water, I jumped off the ship and got your ass, and he thanked me too, although we were not friends. He thanked me profusely when I got back to the ship.
Do you want to paint the big picture? Like, where were you? Approximately what year was it, and why were you there?
Yes, this was 1969. We were in Bahrain in Saudi Arabia, a deep water port up in the Persian Gulf, and we had been moored there for a few days. The Royal Air Force Base, the British Air Force, there was a British Air Force base in Bahrain then, a huge Air Force base, and so there were facilities there, and we were there doing maneuvers up in the Persian Gulf. Anyway, we were going out on maneuvers one day. The back end of the ship, or the aft end of the ship, was tied off, and they had released the front of the ship, or the forecastle of the ship. They had let loose lines, and the front end of the ship was turning out to sea while the back end of the ship was still tied off. They would release it once the front end was turned out. This is how they do it. Well, one of the bosun's mate named Stewart was taking in lines off the forecastle and fell maybe 30 or more feet and hit a metal float in between the pier and the ship, a thing called a camel. Blood shot out of his mouth, and he flopped right into the water, and I was standing on a deck above him. Most of the crew were on the seaward side of the ship, were on the starboard side of the ship, the side of the ship turning out to sea. And Stewart was just pulling a rope in that they had released from the front of the ship, the forecastle of the ship, and was pulling the line back on board the ship. Well, he slipped and somehow, and he was kind of being nautical and being real boatsy, which is hanging off the side of the ship pulling this line, and he somehow fell quite a distance and flopped into the water. I was on a deck above him, just behind the green water shield, and I saw him hit. I didn't think anybody else saw him. I saw blood shoot out of his mouth and him flop into the water and start going down. I stepped over the safety line and jumped quite a distance. I would estimate 30, 40 feet to the water. It was a long drop, and went and got him, and he was about 10 feet underwater by the time I got to him. So I get him by his dungaree shirt and bring him toward the surface, and just before we hit the surface, something hits me in the head like somebody hit me in the head with a brick. I mean, it knocked my head sideways where I couldn't lift it straight back up. I thought my neck was broken. I still got Stewart, who is unconscious and bleeding from the mouth, in my hand. What had happened, a man named Huggins had jumped off behind me, probably maybe 5 or 10 seconds later, because I had time to get Stewart and get back to the surface before he hit me, and he landed on me. It turned out both men had broke their sternums. Stewart's chest hit the back of my Huggins' chest hit the back of my head, and Stewart's chest had hit this metal float. Huggins flops into the water, and he's going down. I bring Stewart over to the camel, which is this float, and with all the strength I had left in me, and my head laying on my shoulder, I muscled him up onto this float. Now, by this time, people were reacting. Huggins is going down. I swim back over to Huggins. He's floundering, and grab him and start bringing him over. I get him to the float. I don't have any more strength left. My head is laying on my shoulder. By this time, other people were coming down off the pier and jumping into the water from off the ship, and they got us on board and took us to the Royal Air Force Base Hospital in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, where I stayed for 2 or 3 weeks with my head on my shoulder. My neck was not broken, but it was sort of spasmed, and I kind of skated for a few days over there after I felt better. And they treated me so well. I was like a hero. Everybody knew I had helped this guy, and he was okay. Stewart was all right. He was kind of what you might call a sort of a redneck guy, and he probably had not spoken 2 words to me in our whole Navy time we'd been on the ship together, which by that time was probably about a year. But when I got back to the ship, he came up to me and thanked me, hugged me, and embraced me, and said his words were, "You are the last person I thought would come and get me." Stewart, wherever you are, Stewart, if you happen to run across this, I would sure love to hear from him. This is Matt Gibson from the USS Stickell, the 888, who were in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia in 1969.
USS Stickell?
The Stickell, Stickell, the 888. was one of those old World War II class destroyers that they had refurbished and took out of mothballs, put some anti-submarine rockets on it, and recommissioned it back in the late 60s.
And what about that other dude that dropped on your head, the Huggins?
Huggins, he was all right. Both men broke their sternums. And but Stewart made it back to the ship. The man who fell and who I thought was a goner, he was back to the ship before I got back. And Huggins, who landed on my head, he stayed in the hospital longer than I did or than Stewart did. Stewart was in the hospital for about a week, and they sent him back to the ship. He cracked his sternum, and I don't know what else, but he was walking around doing his job. By the time I got back, I sat around that hospital as long as they would let me stay there, because they were feeding me and I had room service, and you know, it was really a pleasure to be off the ship, if you know what I mean.
So your head was harder than the camel.
Apparently so. He and I were friends. He had the same name of a guy that I went to high school with. Huggins was his name, and I was always asking him, but he was no relation to the Huggins that I had known before. But he was a good guy, and he was embarrassed for jumping off the side of a ship and landing on us, but he did. He was kind of a goofball anyway. Now that I think about it. You know, how do you do that? Come on, man. You can see. How do you jump straight down on the guy? You know, he couldn't have did that if he tried. he could have did it if he tried.
He probably wouldn't have jumped if he wouldn't have seen you go first.
He might have. On the whole side, only reason I jumped because it looked like there was no one else. I looked around. I was on a deck above him on what's called the green water shield, which is just behind the forecastle, and there's a small deck above the green water shield, and it doesn't allow water to wash over the forecastle and come down the main decks. They have a water shield there. They call it the green water shield, and there's a little deck above it, and then the main deck is just below it. He fell off the forecastle on the main deck, and I jumped over and got his ass. I'm proud of that. I saved a man, you know, and
yeah, that's a big deal. You saved another man's life.
I did. I'm gonna see if I can.
Or actually two, right? Because the other guy you pulled him
Huggins. He was messed up. His sternum break somehow was somewhat worse than Stewart's. The man who fell off the side of the ship and hit the metal. You would think it looked like he would have killed him. And Stewart bled profusely. He was bleeding. Huggins, I didn't even see him bleed. I didn't see much. I was out of it by the time I couldn't even lift him. I had him by his dungaree shirt and got him over to the camel, and I was just holding on like this. And others started jumping in the water, and people were coming down off the pier, jumping down onto the camel, helping us out by that time. And people responded. But I jumped in first and got Stewart. And I would have really been a hero if fucking Huggins hadn't jumped on my fucking head. Pardon my language. I was already thinking, man, I done fucking saved this fucking guy. And then fucking Huggins fucking jumped down on my fucking head and fucking break my neck. I thought, oh, fuck.
Oh, man. All right, Matt. Well, thanks for that.
All right, that's good.
That was good. That was some good. We talked about the swimming pool crowd surfing.
Yeah.
And then the Navy Rescue. All right, that's all for this episode, and we'll talk again about the next. This is the teaser for you. Can you give us a teaser and let's keep it to like 30 seconds about the time when you had problems with your boss in the Navy.
I won't mention names.
Don't do the spoiler. Don't give a spoiler alert, but just
right.
Give us a little bit of a big picture.
Well, I had an arch enemy in the Navy who was a man who had prosecuted me on a number of occasions with captain's masts for minor infractions, which at the time I didn't think was worthy of being sent to captain's mast for, but he did. He didn't like me, and he was a department head, shall I say, on the ship I was on, and he was also a drunk, and he was obnoxious and a bit on the demeaning in his manner and verbiage. And anyway, I hated his guts, and he hated my guts. We hated each other's guts, and he made but he being a man of rank, I had no choice no choices with him. But I won't say any more. But he got his comeuppance one night, and maybe we'll talk about that on the next time we speak.
All right, that's all for today, and look forward to that conversation. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening.
All right, Carl. Peace.
Thanks a lot, Matt. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. And remember that you can find the written transcripts on our website, streetwisenglish.com. You can find the written transcripts. You can find images of our guest speakers. And you can also find information on how to email us or book an English lesson on the website, streetwisenglish.com. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.